This is the Comedy Kiosk, podcast by Monday and Munoz. Please welcome Monday and Munoz.
Welcome to the Comedy Kiosk, a podcast in which we discuss news, opinions, and ideas about comedy. Today, our hosts are going to be me, David, and
today, and just today, it's Igor Monday. But it's also every other time we do it. It's episode 7,600,000.
Don't ruin it, man.
46.
Don't ruin it. Make them think that we have actual friends that we can invite on this.
How many? We've done, I don't know how many, like 80 episodes of this over the course of the last 5 years. And I think there's only one episode on which we are not both featured as co-hosts. That's it. So... You know, I assume that people by now would expect it to be the two of us. But yes, today it's David Munoz and Igor Monday.
It is. Okay, and today's topic is the classic US versus UK humor. Not really versus, but more like comparing them. What's the difference? Is there a difference? Is there not? Are things changing?
No, I think it should be versus. I think we should release all the comedians, all the writers, performers, everyone, and just like let them have it. Like a big rumble, free for all, and we'll see who's better.
I was thinking it was going to be like an envelope thing, like at the Oscars, and the winner is, and then you pull out the envelope and you go, oh my God, shock horror, New Zealand. What do you know?
Yeah, well, New Zealand wouldn't win, but sure.
Oh, ouch.
I mean, it's just a tiny, tiny market. I do kind of follow the New Zealand comedy scene partially, and it's just like the same, 7 people doing everything. So, yeah, it wouldn't stand a chance just due to small numbers. But, yeah. Right, so it's UK versus US humor, I would say, throughout the history and also throughout the genres in different types of entertainment. Mostly will, of course, stick to comedy and particularly like stand-up. But I think humor can also be seen in things such as talk shows or movies or anything else, even music or any other parts of entertainment. So maybe let's start there and go a bit more specific into stand-up a bit later. So my observation is, and I would start with this, is that American humor in all its kind of iterations through all the genres and in media and everything is always a bit more commercial, which is like it's always meant for everyone. It's meant to just provide, easy laughs that everyone can relate to and understand. It's very, I wouldn't say dumbed down, but especially if we talk about, if I look at these talk shows or whatever, like it's always, and I'm not talking like political commentary like John Oliver or something, but really like the Jimmy Fallon.
He's British anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But, Jimmy Fallon or something like this, the humor is always, and if you go back and look at kind of the sitcoms from 70s, 80s, it's, like, hey, honey, where's my dinner? Oh, I haven't made any dinner. Oh, ooh la la, what will my boss say? It's this kind of very relatable, on the surface, kind of, lowest hanging fruit humor, which I think was the point because they're trying to cater to the general population, while I feel like in the UK it was always niche. Like humor was always niche. It was always only for specific parts of society, and it doesn't matter. Like there was always a
niche.
Because
the rich don't know how to laugh.
Well, the rich don't know how to laugh, and maybe the poor don't know how to laugh. So it was always like a middle class kind of thing, I feel, because the poor were too busy, working in the mines, and the rich were too busy colonizing the rest of the world, and then the middle class...
And counting their money.
Yeah, exactly.
And Egyptian statues, or Greek statues.
Everything they have in the History Museum, basically, that they have acquired.
Acquired, yes, that's the word.
Acquired, yeah. Borrowed. So, yeah, I would say that...
Yeah, that's implying they're going to give that back at some point.
Yeah, definitely, sure. But,
Next week.
So I would say that the humor was always very niche, and the specific thing was made for the specific audience, like things like Blackadder or something, Monty Python back in the day. It had a specific audience, like it wasn't for everyone, even their sitcoms like Only Fools and Horses or whatever. You can't compare that, which was like kind of two street thugs with street smarts doing small scams or whatever they were doing, like this kind of stuff. It's really for that middle class. It wouldn't resonate with, let's say, some, again, as you said, like rich, posh people. And then at the same time, in the States, sitcoms were mostly like, oh, here's a family man, and this is what happens. So it was meant for everyone. Like you have a family, you have a house, you have a neighbor.
Easily digestible.
Yeah. It's like you have an annoying neighbor, you have a cool friend at work, and, there is some issues with that. Like, So I feel like it was mostly, even their sitcoms that were kind of niche, I feel like, I don't know, some sitcoms that were meant for African Americans, for example, like The Cosby Show or whatever, they would still cater to everyone, basically. It wasn't really like the struggles of a minority in the States. It was just a family sitcom, right? So I always feel like their humor is more general, while British humor is more specific.
But at the same time, though, I remember, like, another thing, British, like, okay, there's different kinds of humor, of course. I mean, you've got your surreal sort of style and stuff like that, and I think that kind of, I think later on that developed into a more kind of like aiming at like, artistic people or alternative people. And you got other ones like the Carry On films and Benny Hill and stuff, which is all like sex based.
Did you say artistic people or autistic people?
A bit of both. No, artistic. Like, as in, the more kind of like indie or whatever. That's where, maybe your Monty Python, Young Ones, all this sort of other groups are like, they started catering for more different groups. But I do see what you mean in the sense of maybe they, a lot of their stuff is not general for the general populace. It may be quite niche. They're always aiming for a niche group. Like, okay, this is for this group. Okay, this one is for this group. Like, if you're from that, you're not going to get it, sort of thing. And while, maybe the Americans are trying to do the broad appeal sort of thing, like this has to get ratings pretty much because it's very TV based. And I think that's also a big difference in how that kind of comes about as well. Is the American, like, British stand-up is really about the clubs and the bars and for the people that walk in and stuff like that. While the other ones, Americans, it's always like a stepping stone to try to get onto television. And, if you're looking in that sort of thing, and, it's about TV, broad appeal ratings, and that ratings is what gets you advertisers, and advertisers what makes you money, and that sort of thing.
Well, I agree that, and not to go into stand-up yet, I would say, but as we are on like the broader level of just entertainment and so on, even if we don't talk about stand-up in particular, if we talk about just comedy and even just humor as parts of other genres in media, I think you were bang on the money, which is American. Everything is made to make money, which means that, it should be for everyone. It should be relatable to everyone. It should be, for the masses in order to make more money, literally. And then British, I would say that British humor and British comedy isn't even, I don't think Monty Python did it to be famous and rich. I think they did it because they were like weird guys who wanted to share their weird ideas, their little like sketches and stuff. And if you see, even if we compare, let's say, movies, so Monty Python came out, like maybe even 60s or 70s, something like this, like the first few movies, like the Holy Grail and Life of Brian and everything. Holy Grail is such a weird movie, right? It's just full of like hand-drawn bits. It's weird sketches. It's them playing all the characters. It's just a weird fucking movie. And then in the States, at the same time, you had movies like National Lampoon or whatever, where like a family takes a trip. It's very kind of for everyone. Again, like a family man takes his family on a road trip to see America. Like, it's so American.
I think at that point it was more Animal House, because that was more the 80s with National Lampoon with Chevy Chase. I think we're talking more about Animal House a little bit sooner and things like that, which is college based and all that sort of thing. And a lot from the SNL crowd. Again, with a basis on television sort of thing. So I think it's all about like that. Yeah, it's about making that money. And I think that is that mass appeal or the appeal to the majority in that sort of thing. While, like you point out, Monty Python is a really good example of like a bunch of kids almost like out of college or whatever, like, okay, young men who have a limited budget, and instead they're just goofing around. Like, someone's giving them money to make a film. They're just like, I can't believe it. But at the same time, they've got to save costs. So they're like, oh, I'll play this character and this character and this one. We just put different outfits. And it's very much like improv theater, or like maybe what you would expect. What is it? Searchlight. There's that Oxford or Cambridge, like there's the comedy
Footlights,
troupe,
yeah.
and they do Footlights, that's it. And they do that sort of, and it's kind of very reminiscent of that. People who do theatre, it's much more theatre based, I think, and that's the difference. Is that the British one comes from the theatre, where you kind of hand make your own costumes and your own sets, you build it and stuff like that. While the American one's coming more from a television background, where everything has to be filmed, good quality, getting advertisers in to people to watch, and advertisers and all the rest. So it's kind of more polished. So yeah, I think, and that's, I think, quintessentially also the one of the big differences of stand up as well. Like, for example, when I started doing stand up in Moscow, I was living with a British guy, right? We were sharing an apartment, a flat, and he was from Birmingham. And hey, Bill, if you watch, or you listen. So anyway, when I started doing the stand up, he would come to the shows and he would give me feedback later on. And I was like, oh, I've got to fix up this joke. I've got to make it better. I've got to find like the right way to say it and things. And he was like, no, I think he's like, I don't think that's an issue. Because, well, it depends on where you're going to go for it. Like, if you were trying to break into the American market, then yeah, you need to polish the hell out of your show. However, out of your bits. However, you would do well right now, just the way you are in Britain. They would actually really love it. I think your stories are really great because it's rough, it's raw, it feels more genuine. It doesn't feel fake, like it's fake plastic cheese, like in America sort of thing. Like, it's real cheese with that pungent smell, and occasionally you don't want it, but then you do, and stuff like that. And so he kind of mentioned that, and I think that in a way is being the stereotype, but basis on truth, of the big differences also, even just in general humor, but also in stand-up and things. It's polished versus raw, authentic versus scripted, all that sort of thing. And I think that's the quintessential. Is like, Americans like to perfect it so it's perfect so that they can sell it. Well, the British one is about, no, I want you to see, even when you fuck up, I love it. Like, I like it when you stumble on your words, and that's, and even look at like their famous characters as such, like even in comedy films, like Hugh Grant in pretty much every film in the 90s was, the bumbling Brit, oh, fuck, shit, oh, fuck, with a bit of swearing and this and that, like a bit raw and a bit like, oh, he seems like such a gentleman. And then he lets off the F-bomb, in a thing, you're like, oh, and that makes you laugh because he's bumbling around. It's his ineptitude. It's his self-deprecating ineptitude that makes you like him. Well, on the other hand, the Americans, they prefer I remember watching Chevy Chase, for example, in those movies and things like that. And even just his perspective, and people are like, oh, Chevy Chase, great. And I was like, he seems like an arrogant douche a bit, like, this up himself sort of
he was
style.
supposed to be like a comedic character, but if you compare, let's say, Hugh Grant, who's supposed to be like a romantic lead, which means like a handsome, I don't know, bachelor who is attractive to women, then, you compare him to, say, like, who was like a 90, George Clooney, this like perfect groomed, dark, tall guy who is just, or Brad Pitt, or I don't know, Matthew McConaughey or whatever. That this is, again, I agree, like, you have very polished, very produced, very artificial versus very lifelike, very raw, that's why I think even in comedy and in all the other, genres and spheres as well, for example, swearing, you would see much more swearing in like British programs, in British TV and everything past like 8 p.m. or whatever.
And tits.
Well, okay, like...
and bums. They showed bum cracks. Americans blur bum cracks. I still, even to this day, even as a kid, I watch it going, why the bum crack?
Well,
like, if you're going to do the bum crap, why not the cleavage? Why not the cleavage as well then? Like, if you're going to do one, but they left the cleavage, but the bum crap, I'm like, so the bum crack is more suggestive, it's more alluring than the cleavage? Like, you're going to Baywatch, you're going to have people run around with like a massive cleavage and stuff, but the moment there was like a bit of butt crack, they had to blur it.
I feel like you've said the word butt crack too many times in a minute, so I'm a little bit worried, but yeah, I feel like okay, there was definitely a period, especially in comedy in the States, where they were using this shock value and nudity as a weapon as well. If you watch National Lampoon, for example, full of like naked tits, Police Academy, movies like this, even later, like American Pie and whatever, just
they leaned into it.
using that as like
Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah, a lot of
That's
of
another
stuff,
classic.
A lot of stuff. But then in the UK, I feel it's more Yeah, and you wouldn't even get like the leads in the movies are never, hot people. It's just regular
Oh yeah,
people.
I mean, look at the Carry On films and stuff like that. Like the main guys in that, none of them is a heartthrob, not a single one.
Yeah. This
And
is
yet they were running
exactly.
around chasing girls and hooking up.
And then I think this is what, if you watch, things like In Betweeners, where it's
Mm,
just like four, I don't know, just like geeky, horrible looking guys, trying to get past like high school and hook up with girls and stuff. And then you look at American Pie, which is the same. And American Pie, they're presenting them also as these kind of like geeks who cannot like hook up with anyone, but they're actually good looking dudes,
yeah.
And then in
Well, I wouldn't
Betweeners,
say
it's
I wouldn't
just
say the British ones are ugly, but they're just average. They really do try to pick the person who looks normal. Like you can relate to those guys. You'd be like, oh yeah, I'm that one. Like that. I kind of looked like him when I was in high school.
yeah. So like that's what I feel like they're going for.
Yeah.
They're going for that relatable, like anyone's guy. And in America, like what in any like media or anything, and this is, I think this translates into the comedy genre in specific. And now we're talking like kind of American Pie versus In Betweeners or whatever, and then even
Yeah.
more in stand up as well, because I feel like British comics, that's the goal, is not to get on Letterman or whatever was back in the day, like the what was his
Well, that
name?
was
Like
step one. That was step one.
that was step
Jimmy,
one.
was it Johnny Carson? Right?
Carson,
Johnny
yeah, the
Carson?
Carson
Jimmy
show,
Carson?
yeah, the Carson show. So that was your goal, was to get on TV, to do those 10 minutes, and to potentially open the doors into Hollywood as a writer, as an actor, and that's what they all
Yep.
did. Like Martin Short, Steve Martin, Chevy Chase, all the kind of 70s, 80s guys. Then Seinfeld, then Louis C.K. had his own sitcom. Bill
Yeah.
Burr. That's the dream. That's Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
All of them, like the whole.
Because that's where the
Sandler's
big
crew.
money and the standard
Yeah.
paychecks come in.
That was the road to fame and success. While in Britain, it was finding your niche and then catering to that niche. So
Yeah.
people who don't like, I don't know, Gervais, they just didn't go to his shows. Or Carr or McIntyre, if we talk about some commercial comedians, or any type, Peter Kay or whatever. They just found their niche and they played to that niche, and that was their success. For people
Yeah.
that like them to seek them, right? Not to play something that anyone would like. And I think that's maybe the essential difference. But then how does that show in reality is that, I would say, as we said, like the American stuff is way more produced as well. Like I know that if you are going to make it, if you're going to go for those auditions for any of those, Hollywood things or those competitions they have, Last Comic Standing, this and that, even these like America's Got Talent or something, they heavily produce and edit what you're supposed to say, what you can say, what you cannot say. Because I've seen the same bits, like comedians that go to, let's say, America's Got Talent. I see that same bit that he recorded in some bar in, like wherever. And it's very, very different to the 3 minutes they get to do on stage on AGT, because this goes out on NBC, it goes out on YouTube, the whole world can see it. It's so edited, right? It's completely different. And then when it comes to like British comedy, like when I was on Fringe 2-3 years ago, I went to see, usually British comics take their new show to the Fringe for like 3 weeks, like the big names. But it's like a testing ground, like a workshop for them. And then in the end, they end up with a real show. They can tour around the UK, sometimes like Australia, New Zealand, States, whatever. And then they maybe film it for streaming or something. And it's the same jokes. Like no one edits them, no one changes. I mean, they do, of course. They like work on
They
the
change
joke.
it evolves.
Yeah, but it's not like produced. It's not edited. So,
But then that's and I think that's what also, like, to continue on the stand-up comedy, it's the basis for it though. American ones are about getting your Netflix special, like, that sort of thing. It's about getting into TV. It's about getting into that sort of thing. While the British background, a lot of that is Fringe based. Fringe has been a kind of like a breeding ground for comedy. But the thing is, the Fringe, if you remember, is actually not a comedy festival. It's an arts festival. Comedy is just one of the elements. They have a whole bunch of other stuff there. It's just the element that it ended up growing and becoming like the main attraction. But it's not actually a comedy festival per se. It's an arts festival. And so hence a lot of artistic people go in there. So I think you get a lot more of the surreal, experimental, you get sketch, you get that sort of stuff. And they kind of influence each other because, the comedians hang out and they watch each other's shows and then they go, oh, I can do that. And this is what we're talking about, that footlights thing, with the opposite, those, the Monty Python guys. It's coming from a theater background. It's coming from an artistic background when it's about art and just making it funny. It's a funny form of art sort of thing. I think that's more like the British way of thinking about it or doing it, or that's just the background to it. Well, the American one, it's a business and it's about making, your show. And that's hence they're focused on that tight 10, making your tight 5, your tight 10, doing bits that are family friendly, doing bits that are shocking, and they kind of work on it and really hone it. It's like getting the sharpest edge so that every time you perform, you're guaranteed. So that's how you get your bookings. You know what I mean? So you're kind of really honing your jokes and your material. But the thing is, you have really an hour's worth of material and that's it. But you're honing that hour in total down to the razor's edge. While the British ones are more like every year, let's create a new Fringe show. Every year, let's write something else. And I remember hearing a thing where, people were amazed that Louis C.K. was bringing out specials on such a regular basis. Almost every year, he would do he really and all the American comedians, I remember hearing all people like, on talk shows going, oh my God, Louis, you're so amazing. Like, oh my God, another special. How do you do it? I couldn't even do that. Like, and a lot of them were comedy backgrounds. Man, I couldn't do it. It takes me years to come up with my bits. And then at the same time, listening to this, thinking people at Fringe do it constantly. Amateurs every year are writing whole new bits on a regular basis. What are you talking about? It's just that Louis C.K. gets it to to that razor's edge. He gets that to that sharpened level quickly, right? He gets it there, but he's still just like every other comedian. Like, he's not that special in that regard. Like, he does good jokes and things, but he's creating material on a yearly basis, just like a lot of the British comedians who go every year to freaking Fringe are doing. Maybe his stuff is better. That's true. That's what makes him better. But they're all doing it.
Yeah, this is also, I would say, because again, for an American comedian, it's not stand-up, right? Stand-up is one of the things they do. They mostly do writing, they do SNL, they do producing, they do sitcoms, they do a lot of stuff, like someone like Patton Oswalt will do like probably 10 different things at any moment. Like, he'll be writing a special, but he's also appearing in some movies, in some sitcoms, writing a show, presenting something on TV, probably some quiz or whatever. Like stand-up is one of the things. And then in the UK, it's more like, okay, there are people definitely like Jimmy Carr that's on every program. And he still manages to do every year or 2 years, he has a show. He's on the road and he's touring with a new show. So I would say that for British comedians, stand-up is still and always like the priority. These other gigs,
it's the bread and butter.
Yeah, these other gigs, they're just complementary to their stand-up, and they still all go touring and stuff. Jack Whitehall, who recently got like really big in Hollywood and starred in a few Disney movies and whatever, he still tours, he still does the shows and stuff. I don't think a lot of like Sandler hasn't done stand-up in like 30 years or something between his breakthrough in Hollywood with the Happy Gilmore or whatever it was called to 5 years ago, I guess, like when COVID hit.
Yeah, so, I think a lot of them, it's comedy was just a stepping stone to get to their true dream sort of thing. I mean, even like the really great ones, like was it Robin Williams? He stopped doing stand up for decades as well. Like, he stopped it while he was doing Good Morning Vietnam, Mrs. Doubtfire. He wasn't doing any stand up at all. And it wasn't until I think it was Chris Rock or something, because he was kind of feeling down, he was bummed out, and it was Chris Rock said was like, when was the last time you did stand up? Like, do a stand up show. Like, people would love that. And he kind of went, oh yeah. And he realized that's what he missed. Like, because the thing is, he'd made it to that big thing, to the big leagues, but he'd already let that behind. And I think the British mentality, on the other hand, is probably that self-deprecating, oh man, I could totally tits this up, in the next year. I could do something totally horrible and just ruin everything and ruin my life. I better have my back. I can't let go of my backup. I've got to keep touring and keeping that as my thing as well. And I think that might be also it. Like, they just, that's their bread and butter. That's the original bread and butter. And you're not going to completely let go of it just in case everything else collapses.
Well, yeah, that's, if you look at like Eddie Murphy, for example, right? So he started with stand-up and he was huge with stand-up in the 80s. But then, Beverly Hills Cop happened, and then his like music career happened and whatever. And and then he went back to stand up, I don't know, 10 years later, because obviously, Hollywood money from one movie is way more than even like a well selling special, like stand up special or anything. So that's maybe because in America there is Hollywood, and whatever Hollywood produces is marketed to the whole world. While British media is not so. I feel like they make things for themselves, and sometimes accidentally something becomes global. Like first
Harry
two
Potter.
seasons. Well, Harry Potter wasn't for the, it's like a book. But first two seasons of Black Mirror, for example, I would say are kind of quintessentially British, especially like the first few episodes. It's very British. And I feel like it was made for BBC, like just for them. But then it took off because a lot of people were taking it as, an omen of things to come and, prediction of the nearby future and whatever. Even things like Sherlock, they're very British, again, you don't even have like a handsome guy playing, no offense to Benedict, but you know what I mean? Like classically handsome guy playing the main role.
Square jaw, lantern jawed guy.
Yeah. So a lot of these things that did go global kind of accidentally, or things like Mr. Bean. I mean, look at the guy, So,
that's a great example, actually.
I think it just kind of accidentally happened that more people liked it than they assumed that will be on the little kind of British Isles. But it's just a fluke. While everything made in Hollywood is meant for the global market, right? They're kind of thinking, how would this go in China? How would this go in Brazil? And so on. And I would say like the most British thing that America has done, in my opinion, was Pink Panther. Like that was very British, like the original Pink Panther movies with Peter Sellers, and that kind of weird comedy of like basically almost like a sketch, where he's playing a very unbelievable character. This wouldn't exist in real world, we got a guy with like a super strong accent, confusing things constantly, being a complete doofus, everything like that. This is very British to me. But I think Peter Sellers might have been British. Was he? Was he?
Yeah, he was.
So I think maybe that's why as well, because maybe he brought this dose of Britishness into the role as well. So
definitely.
So okay, even in this, as I wanted to say, like the most most British thing on American cinemas and TVs was actually a British comedian. So there you go. But and then
I was going to say. So do you think that like we got quintessential American, polished, made for money sort of thing. Like you got to polish it up, clean it, and try to sell it. Then you got the British one, which is a bit more arty, a bit more aiming for a niche, or being, finding your, being authentic or whatever, that sort of stuff, authentic voices and things. But do you think there's now some overlap? Do you think with time, because I'm beginning to think that like with a lot, like you mentioned Jack Whitehall, but he's kind of overlapping. He's British, but he's kind of getting an American sensibility, so Americans have a high punchline rate in their stand-up comedy. They're, polishing, it's the whole got to laugh every 30 seconds or whatever it is. Well, the British one is more like, no, you tell an entertaining story and then end with a big whammy, but like you can build up. It's about tension, pauses. Don't be afraid to just sit on a pause and build the tension. It's much more about that. And like, okay, so if we look at like, quintessential American stand-ups, we kind of mentioned like Jim Gaffigan, Bill Burr.
I would say, for me, real American stand-up, and what to this day a lot of people are trying to reproduce and be like, and they mold their style and humor and everything is Seinfeld, like 90s Seinfeld. To me,
I would say Seinfeld, and I would say the other one that I noticed a lot of American comedians definitely respect is Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah,
which is earlier, but it's that high punch rate. It's like short one-liners, bang, 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 bang.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, we can talk about Chris Rock and Eddie Murphy and Dave Chappelle and, Gaffigan and all of this. Yeah. But I still think, when people, in a lot of people's, especially in like the stand-up world, but not only, because a lot of people, for example, here in Croatia, a lot of people were exposed to stand-up as a format, as a type of, art or performance through the sitcom Seinfeld. Because when that was coming out in the 90s, there was no stand-up here, like real stand-up. You couldn't go to a club and see a comedian. It only appeared like 2002, 2005, something like this. So when the TV show was coming out, those little snippets in between the actual sitcom where he's doing stand-up, that was the first time people would see someone doing stand-up, right? And I think for a lot of people around the world, maybe similar thing. So that's, in the same way that Friends shaped a lot of, and we talked about it when we had that episode where we dissect and discuss Friends, how it kind of shaped the pop culture and a lot of humor and tropes and everything around the world because it had such global reach. I think Seinfeld did something similar for American humor and American stand-up, and this is why maybe similar to what I would say maybe Gervais did for British humor. Let's say that he was maybe similar to that, but on a smaller scale. I don't think somewhere in some tiny village in Montenegro everyone has seen Gervais's The Office or something, but I can assure you everyone has seen Seinfeld because it's been on TV like for decades.
And I think these days most people, when it comes to The Office, have seen the American version now. Like it eclipsed the British version.
Or that as well. Completely. Yeah.
But the thing is, okay, so when you talk, so we're talking about the American comics now. Who would you say for you epitomizes the British comics?
Well, this I would say for me at least, my first association would be like if you would say British humor, I would say something like Gervais, because he is, like always unapologetic. So, and recent two specials were very, I would say, even, he would provoke the backlash and so on. Some things are in there just to provoke, hype and buzz and everything. But even before that, if you go to his early stuff, it's always, thought provoking. It's always direct to the issue. It's always very I don't know, it's very different to American humor where it's what's the deal with airplane food, this and that. It's more like, hey, you think like Hitler is burning in hell or what? It's very again thought-provoking and this kind of stuff. And I feel like this is because if we take anyone else who is on that level, like Jimmy Carr is a one-liner, which is always it's hard to say that he's
more of American style. Like he's actually, I would say he's heavily influenced by American style. He's British, and I think he's got like the banter part when it comes to like interacting with the crowd and things and the heckling. All that's a very British thing, like almost inviting it. But I think that quick one-liner sort of stuff is. I think he's been influenced by the American style.
I don't know because I would say the opposite. I would say that one-liners are more British, for example, and even deadpan I would say that is more British because the only two examples I can, of course, like I don't know every comedian, but I'm talking mainstream, the only two examples I can think of in the States are Dimitri Martin in the last like 20 years and Stephen Wright, was it, in like the kind of 90s and whatever.
And Mitch Hedberg.
Yeah. So those are like the three guys with kind of deadpan one-liner style.
And of course Rodney Dangerfield, that he's the one who they're based it on.
Okay, yeah. So it's like one per decade, let's say, right? Something like that. And then in the UK at the moment,
the Messiah has returned.
Yeah, I can name like five guys that are doing it. You have Stuart Francis, who's Canadian, but he's based in the UK for a long time. You have Tim Vine. Then you have the husband of Sarah Millican, Gary Delaney. But this is also, again, if we shift the focus from men to women as well, I would say, like, if you look at American female comics, you have this, like, hot chick talking about men. And I'm not saying that's all of them. I'm saying that's the ones that make it to, mainstream. Again, Whitney Cummings.
It's like Ali Wong, Tiffany Haddish, there's Amy Schumer even.
Amy Schumer back in the day.
Stuff
Whitney
like that.
Cummings, Amy Schumer, Sarah
Silverman.
Sarah
But
Silverman.
she's more alternative, I would say. She's kind of a shocker as well. She's really likes like shocking people.
Yeah, she's a bit like...
She's getting closer to fringe.
shock value comedian, but still, I would say... then what's her name? Eliza,
Yeah.
but not her.
Yeah.
The other one. Oh my God, I cannot. Nikki Glaser. Nikki Glaser.
Ah, right, Nicky Glaser. Right.
So, and you have that, and then in the UK, female comedians are like Sarah Millican, or I don't know, Sue Perkins, or like just kind of women. You know, they're not like Barbies. They're not made for the stage. They're not.
Well, it's the sell thing. They don't have to sell themselves. Like the American ones maybe are trying to sell themselves on many different levels. Like as in, it's about like the product and trying to get like the advertising and trying to get and it's that thing of you got to market yourself top of the line on everything. Well, maybe the British ones are more like, as we were saying before, they're kind of like, I want you to relate to me more. I want to be as relatable as possible. You know, I'm just the woman that you could meet, like, you know, anywhere at any point, you know, while you're walking around town, while you're meeting your friends. You know, I could be like the friend of a friend, I could be the friend of someone else, like, you know, someone that you meet at a party, someone that you meet at a bar, someone you meet at shopping, whatever.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that just because a girl is pretty or it's, you know, well groomed or dressed or something, that her humor is not there. I think some of these women I've named are absolutely hilarious. Like Nikki Glaser is really funny, for example. Sarah Silverman is really funny. Whatever. Whitney Cummings also.
I like Ali Wong as well.
Ali Wong. So all of them, they are where they are because they deserved it. I mean, they're not Amy Schumer maybe, but the rest of them, you know. Well, I mean, it's kind of personal opinion, but that really feels like an industry plant, and the whole way like she won the talent show and everything. But still, you know, I would say that they have deserved it. It's just that's the difference between the markets, right? Where this is what they want to see and this is what they want to see, and that's maybe the difference. Or even when you look at you know, people like, there's this super funny guy. He was runner up on America's Got Talent like 6-7 years ago. Preacher Lawson, I believe his name is. Super funny guy, but like super handsome, you know, just a kind of bodybuilder body, you know, super cute face, just a handsome dude, you know. And I okay, he doesn't use that, like he jokes about different things and that's fine, but I couldn't take like self-deprecating humor from, you know, I'm like, dude, come on. Really?
Yeah.
Like, you struggle with women or something, you know, like people don't do you favors. Come on, dude. But, you know, that's why you have in the UK, you have people like Ricky, where it's like, look at me, you know, I'm a chubby, short, balding man. You know, obviously this is going to be the topic of my stand-up, right? Among
but
other
for
things.
me also, but for me also, like when I think about British comedy, and also me being maybe a little bit older than you, like I'm thinking of people like Billy Connolly. You know, I grew up with watching Billy Connolly doing his specials on Australian TV and stuff like that, or Eddie Izzard later on, like, you know, and Ross Noble. Like they were kind of, for me, that's like the British comedy that I like, you know, a bit surreal, a bit weird, or the guy who's just telling funny stories. Billy Connolly was just awesome at that. Like it's something, he would even tell the jokes that people were telling each other at bars, like the jokes that you would tell at school. He would tell them in his sets, like, oh, I just heard this great joke, I want to share it with you guys, so you guys can share it, you know, with your friends and whatever. And he would like retell these jokes, and it was just the guy that you would meet at the bar. And the whole thing's, I think, also once again, it's that theater background. Like he started as a musician, and he would banter with the audience and tell stories between his songs. And he realized at one point that he was playing less songs and doing more talking. And eventually he just went, oh, I think I'm just going to transition completely. Like, I'm just going to ditch the songs. Like, there's no point. People are here, they prefer to hear my stories. So he transitioned to that. And I think that's also, once again, it's that theater, that roughness, that rawness, the guy at the pub, the person who's, you know, funny that you meet, that you can just, you know, or you bump into them at the waiting in line at the supermarket and you're selling quips and you're just passing the time with the person next to you. Next week you go, you're a funny fucker. And they're like, oh, thank you.
But
you know,
I think that's maybe another crucial difference and a key element in this, because I would say that British people in general are just funny and they value kind of banter. They don't get offended as easily. They will just, you know, call each other a cunt and a, you know, like a wanker and whatever. in a friendly manner, and they would meet up for drinks, and they would insult each other and banter and joke at each other's expense, and that's it. While I would say Americans are a bit more sensitive, and that wouldn't really fly there. Even on TV, there are so many British TV programs where they openly mock or not mock but joke about, like the royal family or the prime minister or the this and that politician, and they dress up as them and they do sketches and they whatever. And then in the US, only like SNL did Trump or whatever, and the guy was so angry, and half of the country was like, oh, you cannot imitate our president. And while in the UK no one would ever be like, oh, you cannot imitate Boris Johnson. No one cares. It's just comedy, it's just a joke. So I feel like really that as a nation, they have more and better sense of humor.
Oh, I disagree with the president thing, because they've been mocking presidents on SNL for politicians in general. Hillary Clinton, they've been doing that since the beginning. I think the difference is it's just Trump. It's his supporters. Those that complain about that sort of stuff, it's specifically his supporters that are just they're pretty, like, some, not all of them, but some of them have basically made him their messiah, and they're kind of treating him like Muhammad or whatever. You just can't make an image of him. You can't talk disparagingly about him. You cannot criticize, that sort of thing. I think that's a very specific sort of a very kind of weird
in the
moment.
UK. I don't think that there is a topic that you cannot joke about. That's the thing. I think even people that are super into the royal family, even the royal family themselves, like they attend one of those like end of the year kind of big galas that's done.
I think actually it is the royal something or other. I think it's actually their show.
Exactly. And usually like someone from the royal family attends, and they could like do jokes about them. They even they wouldn't like roast them, they wouldn't insult them.
Yeah, but I'll say there's a limit. There is a limit. And
of course there's a limit.
Comedians know it.
Of course there's a limit.
Comedians are aware of it.
Otherwise it's just, slander or whatever.
But that being said, apparently the Queen of the former Queen Elizabeth II, she actually was a big stand-up fan. She loved stand-up comedy, to the point. That's why when they did those shows, she would go afterwards and she would meet the other way around. The comedians would be told if they would like to have a meeting with the Queen, which was always to be accepted, and the comedians would then wait in line, and basically they'd all get to like shake her hand, and she would say a few words to them and things like that. And there's stories from different comedians about things that she said, and that she herself was very curious about the whole, like, oh, how do you guys do it, like, oh, and what happens if one forgets one's lines, what do you do, sir? And it's like, oh, well, I did it, and they have a little conversation. Like she really liked stand-up. Apparently she was quite the fan.
Yeah, apparently, like one of the princes, I guess William as well, even invited like a bunch of comedians to his wedding and whatever it was, and he like came on some dates to their shows and stuff. That's what I'm saying. Like I feel like comedy is not above or below anyone. Like it doesn't mean like stand-up is just for, I don't know, dodgy bars and basements. It feels like it's a kind of national thing, and that's why a lot of things that they have on TV, like the panel shows, for example, which are full of stand-up comedians, work so well there and don't work at all in the States.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. True. Yeah. It just doesn't seem to quite catch them, because it's about a bunch of guys sitting around, just shooting the breeze. Really, the game show itself ends up becoming like a secondary issue, like points or whatever. It's more about like just the banter.
Yeah, that's why, because I feel like when they say celebrities, stand-up comedians are, A-listers. While in the States, when you say celebrities, you don't think, Whitney Cummings. Comedian. You think Angelina Jolie. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But even though Whitney Cummings has like written shows, had massive sales and everything, she's incredibly successful, and you're like, yeah, no, Angelina. Yeah, no, you're very right. Yeah, it is interesting that. But so. Do you think are there any comedians that kind of break this mold, or are there any subgroups that you reckon break this kind of stereotype of American versus UK humor?
Yeah, I would say the Americans that I feel break the mold are people like Dimitri Martin, who does like deadpan one-liners, or people like Bo Burnham, who does satire, music satire, which seems more British.
He would fit Fringe so well. Yeah. He would fit Fringe. So artistic.
That would do well on Fringe, for example, both of them.
I think for me also especially during the 90s, the crop of like alternative comics, when it comes to like your Maria Bamfords, your Patton Oswalts, your David Crosses, these sorts of people like Tig Notaro, all that sort of thing. Like these are people who they decided to break the standard stand up, and those kind of people, I think they would fit just wonderfully in fringe. Like they kind of have the fringe mentality, but they kind of developed it themselves, doing these kind of guerrilla shows where they used to pop up in like laundry mats and stuff and do shows there, because it was a whole point of breaking that polishedness. Like, let's screw that, let's totally break. So I think the Americans have the alternative comedians. That's a subgroup who kind of decided to kind of go against it, and they end up with their own sketch shows. What is it? Odekirk and Cross, they end up like with their Bob and Dave show, that sort of stuff. And also North, you have to remember, Canada also has like Kids in the Hall and things like that. So I think Canadian humor also is very kind of British alternative sort of stuff. So that's also bled into the US sort of style as well, because Montreal's just for laughs. I mean, being different to Fringe, people do say it's a network opportunity. It's a place where producers watch comedians in order to make shows. So it is very heavily about that marketing sort of aspect. But it also has a Fringe element to it. It has like that slightly unpolishedness to it to a certain degree. But it is, you can tell it's North American, absolutely. And when it comes to British comedians, I don't know. Yeah.
Basically, like the alternative American comics would probably do well in the UK, and the mainstream British comics would probably be some weird alternative in the US. Like I cannot imagine Bill Bailey, Noel Fielding, these guys being
Ross
mainstream,
Noble.
being on TV in the US, but they're huge in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's the interesting thing. But then there are British comedians who I think would also transition well. I think Ricky Gervais actually does transition kind of well, because I think he has that polishedness from being a writer originally, like writing a show and stuff like that. I think he really does keep that kind of polished element to him. The other ones, I don't know, like you said before, Jack Whitehall. I think he's got like a clean cut sort of thing. I think that's why he's transitioned as an actor. Like, he's able to get into the American market because there's something relatable on an American level to him, sort of thing. Russell Howard, maybe even.
Maybe.
A bit.
I feel like it's these more classic stand-ups, let's call them that, just observational comedy, storytelling, and very charismatic, very eloquent guys that move a lot around, camera ready, because Russell is a good-looking guy. Whitehall is like a British cutie posh guy. So I feel that translates well to the American stage.
Yeah. What about Daniel Sloss? Where would you put him?
I feel like he would also work well in the States, because I think that his Netflix specials and everything work also globally. So whatever is, I think whoever reaches mainstream, I think they would do well in the US as well, because that's what they do. They want to produce mainstream.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing with him is he kind of reminds me, because, he has like these themes or these morals, sort of, it kind of reminds me a bit of George Carlin, like a British version of a George Carlin style. You know what I mean? I think there's also a group of American comics which are the ones who are like telling it as it is, the ones who kind of bit on the preach sort of level, like the preaching, like, this is my opinion and this is why I'm right and blah, 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 and making it in a funny way. And I think there are some, British comedians that also have that. I think Daniel Sloss being one of them. He talks about like the right thing, the wrong thing to do, and different stuff. And I think there's also that element. But this is what I'm saying is also, I think we're now getting to the point where a lot of us bleeding one into the other, thanks to things like YouTube and Netflix being a global, streaming service, that we're all watching each other's senses of humor and styles, and it's kind of creating its own. I think it's kind of, I don't know, would you say it's homogenizing, or would you saying that it's just exposing us and it's now there's many different alternatives that you can get into? I don't know. What do you reckon?
I would say you still kind of pick a style, or not necessarily pick a side, but pick a style, because I've met, I don't know, Danish comedians with super British humor, again, deadpan one-liners or whatever. And then you have people like Trevor Noah, like South African comedians who are super Americanized, right? His stand-up is, or Australian comedians who are weird and niche and character comedians like Sam Campbell, perfect for the UK. But you have people like Jim Jeffries, who is perfect for the US. And that's exactly where they actually export their shows and material.
Yeah, but Jim Jeffries is also a British. Like, he lived in Britain. He did comedy there for ages. So, like, I think he kind of first got a bit more noticed in Britain, then transitioned over to the American stuff.
Yeah, but maybe that's because he felt like he can make it on the mainstream American market and earn the money, and he fit that market.
Yeah, Australian comedians, that's another combination there. Anyway, yeah, I think that's a nice little area to wrap up on. We'd like to hear your feedback on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, wherever you can find us, the Comedy Kiosk. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed the debate, and please add your own 2 cents if you're able.
If you've ever seen us perform live as well, or if you find our videos online, let us know, what do you think, which type of humor we lean towards more, like which style we belong.
We've been the Comedy Kiosk. Thank you for listening. I'm David Munoz, and with me, as always...
Not as always, but today, it's Igor Monday. Thank you. And
very true. Ciao.